Silence had ruled St. Alderic Abbey for centuries, until someone decided it was safer to kill for it. If you want to follow every hidden motive and every buried lie, stay with this case. Hit like and subscribe. A battered gray sedan coughed once and died beneath the ivy-choked stone archway. Detective Miles Hargreaves stepped out into the courtyard, collar raised against the Atlantic wind that sliced between the ancient walls. The abbey loomed above him, narrow windows watching like blind eyes. Places like this remembered things, sometimes better than people. A thin monk hurried across the flagstones, sandals slapping softly. He bowed his head. "Detective Hargreave." "I'm Brother Ansel, sir. Abbot Rowan is expecting you." Hargreave scanned the courtyard. No birds, no voices, just monks moving with practiced avoidance as if death itself might overhear them. "And the scholar?" he asked. "Professor Edgar Belmont is in the infirmary," Ansel said. "We moved him after we found him, but the archive room is untouched, exactly as it was." That detail stayed with Hargreave. Belmont was no obscure academic. He was loud, relentless, and famously careless with reputations, especially when history got in his way. Dead scholars were not unheard of. Dead scholars inside a 12th century abbey behind a locked door were something else entirely. They crossed the cloister. Frost clung to the stone like old regret. Monks tending winter ivy paused, watching the detective with guarded eyes. Others looked down, unwilling to acknowledge that violence had stepped across sacred ground. Abbot Lucas Rowan waited near the refectory doors, tall, silver-haired, posture rigid with restraint. "Our community is shaken," he said. "We hoped you could bring clarity." "Your message mentioned unusual circumstances," Hargreave replied. Rowan hesitated just long enough to matter. "Yes, the archive door was bolted from the inside. We had to dismantle part of the lower wall to reach the latch. No forced entry, no disorder, a perfect enclosure. The archive lay at the end of a narrow corridor lined with portraits of long-dead abbots. The oak door was sealed with a heavy iron chain and fresh padlock. Brother Ansel unlocked it. Inside, the room breathed dust and age. Tall shelves bowed under the weight of manuscripts. A single slit window cut winter light across the central desk. Belmont's body was gone, but the story of his last hours remained. An overturned ink pot, notes scattered in agitation, and one thick leather volume lying open, its Latin text dense, precise, dangerous. Hargreave leaned closer. One page had been cut out, cleanly, deliberately. "The Codex of Veiled Testimonies," Abbot Rowan said quietly. "Many believe it should never be studied." "Forbidden texts tend to attract stubborn men," Hargreave replied. As he circled the room, something else caught his attention, a narrow strip of stone near the far bookcase, oddly free of dust. He tapped it, hollow, not natural, a space someone didn't want noticed. The locked door, the missing page, the hidden cavity, nothing here suggested accident. Everything suggested preparation. As Hargreave stepped back into the corridor, his expression hardened. "Someone inside this abbey wanted Professor Belmont silenced," he said, "and they planned it carefully." Behind him, the archive door closed with a sound too final to be innocent. By late morning, St. Alderic Abbey had resumed its outward rhythm. Bells marked the hours. Sandaled footsteps crossed stone corridors. Chants rose and fell like controlled breathing. Yet beneath the surface, the place felt unsettled, as if the walls themselves were waiting for a verdict. Detective Miles Hargreaves started with the library. Truth often hid where silence was enforced. Sister Elena Ward stood between towering shelves, motionless, her dark habit absorbing the light. She did not turn when he entered. Dust motes drifted slowly in the cold sunbeams. "You seek understanding," she said at last, "but understanding brings disorder." "Disorder already arrived," Hargreave replied. "It just arrived quietly." She adjusted her glasses, eyes sharp and unblinking. "Professor Belmont," she said, lacked humility. He dissected sacred texts as if they were mechanical puzzles. The Codex of Veiled Testimonies was not merely controversial. It challenged authority, questioned relics, implied deception sanctified by time. I warned him, she admitted. Some doors remain closed for good reason. She also mentioned hearing movement in the archive well past night prayers, a restless presence, footsteps pacing, a man unwilling to leave unanswered questions alone. Conviction, Hargreave noted, often masqueraded as righteousness. He moved next to the guest wing. Thomas Hale occupied a cramped chamber cluttered with parchment and half-finished translations. The man looked exhausted, cornered. "He destroyed my career," Hale said before the detective finished speaking. "Belmont published a review that made me a cautionary tale. Then he arrives here, granted access I begged for." "Where were you after prayers?" Hargreave asked. "In my room. No lamp burned," Hale faltered, admitted stepping into the cloister briefly. No witnesses, no confirmation. Resentment filled the gaps, but resentment alone rarely planned locked rooms. Lady Marian Cross received him later, wrapped in tailored elegance that clashed with the Abbey's austerity. She spoke calmly, but her hands betrayed her. "Yes, we were involved once," she said. He ended it without apology. "You burned letters this morning." A pause, controlled, calculated. Some things lose value when exposed. Hargreave noticed ash ground deliberately into the stone near the garden lantern. Not careless disposal, erasure. Abbot Lucas Rowan waited in his study. Firelight flickered against ancient shelves. He admitted confronting Belmont late. "The professor accused the Abbey of historic fraud," Rowan said quietly. "Forged relics, a deception that outlived its creators." "Did he have evidence?" Rowan hesitated. Fatigue or fear, Hargreave couldn't yet tell. Crossing the courtyard afterward, the detective noticed the groundskeeper again. Caleb Marsh stood near the tool shed, watching too intently to be idle. Chalky dust clung to his boots, the same pale dust from the archive floor. Hargreave slowed, filing it away. Not an accusation, not yet. Inside St. Alderic Abbey, motives were plentiful. But someone here understood the building far better than scripture, and that knowledge was beginning to matter. After midday prayers faded into silence, Detective Miles Hargreave returned to the archive. The chamber felt colder than before, not just from the stone, from awareness, as if the room knew it was being examined again and did not approve. He lit a portable lamp and began slowly, methodically. No haste, no assumptions. The dustless strip near the far bookcase drew him first. Kneeling, he brushed a gloved hand across the stone. The edges were too clean, too deliberate. Something heavy had rested there recently. Not centuries ago, days, perhaps hours. He tapped the stone again. Hollow, a cavity behind the wall or beneath it. Hargreave rose and examined the bookcase itself. Most hinges were corroded with age. One was not. Hidden behind a row of neglected manuscripts, it gleamed faintly, oiled. Maintained, he applied pressure. The shelf did not open, but it shifted. Barely. Enough. Enough for a man who knew where to push. "Interesting," Hargreave murmured. At the central desk, the open codex waited. Belmont's final obsession. Hargreave studied the Latin carefully, tracing the clean absence where a page had been removed. The cut was surgical. No tear. No damage, intent. He opened the desk drawers, quills, parchment, ink dust. Then the lowest drawer resisted slightly. He pulled harder. A soft click answered from beneath the desk. A hidden compartment slid open. Inside lay a folded parchment fragment, ink smudged, handwriting unmistakable. Belmont's. Hargreave unfolded it carefully. The translation was incomplete, rushed, but one line stood out with alarming clarity. "Trade in false sanctities, crafted to deceive rulers and pilgrims alike. Forgery, relics," and beneath it a second note, shakier still. "Patterns repeat in the present, materials sourced locally, evidence concealed within the Abbey itself." Hargreave exhaled slowly. Belmont hadn't just uncovered medieval fraud, he had traced it forward, into now. A faint sound reached him, soft, deliberate, a footstep retreating. Hargreave straightened instantly. "Who's there?" Silence answered, too complete. He moved to the door. The corridor stood empty, but something on the stone floor caught the lamp's glow. Dust. a thin trail of pale, chalky residue, fresh, the same dust he had seen clinging to Caleb Marsh's boots. The trail led away from the archive, toward a narrow servant's passage half hidden behind a faded tapestry. Hargreaves swept it aside. Scrape marks scored the stone frame. Recent, he pushed the door. It groaned open. Cold air spilled out, stale and unused, carrying the scent of oil and earth. A narrow corridor sloped downward, its floor disturbed by careful footsteps. Not hurried, purposeful. This was no forgotten crawlspace. Someone had been using it, regularly. At the far end stood a reinforced wooden door, modern iron lock, scratched, repeatedly accessed. Hargreaves did not force it. He had enough. When he emerged into the courtyard, he found Marsh near the woodpile sorting tools with exaggerated calm. The man looked up, eyes narrowing. "You seem to know this place well," Hargreaves said evenly. "Even the passages most people forgot." Marsh's hand stilled. "Worked here long enough," he replied. "You learn things." "Yes," Hargreaves said, "you do." As he turned away, the detective felt it settle into place, not certainty yet, but alignment. Motive, access, knowledge. Belmont had found the truth buried in stone and silence, and someone had decided to bury him with it. Night settled over St. Alderic Abbey without ceremony. Lanterns dimmed, doors closed. Voices thinned to whispers and then vanished altogether. What remained was stone, wind, and memory. Detective Miles Hargreaves welcomed the hour. Darkness simplified things. People moved when they believed no one was watching. He stepped into the cloister after supper, boots echoing softly beneath the vaulted arches. The courtyard lay pale under moonlight, frost glinting like powdered glass. Somewhere water dripped, slow and patient. His first stop was the library. A thin ribbon of light slipped beneath the heavy door. Hargreaves pushed it open without knocking. Sister Elena Ward stood rigid beside a lectern, her posture sharp enough to cut. An oil lamp burned low, illuminating a thick ledger and several sealed volumes. "You work late," Hargreaves said. "Certain texts require vigilance," she replied too quickly. "Especially now." "The codex," he said. "It's been moved." Her jaw tightened. "To the vault for protection." "By whose authority?" "Mine." Hargreaves studied her hands, white-knuckled, trembling just slightly. "Did Belmont discover something that frightened you?" he asked. "Or something that threatened the Abbey?" Her eyes flashed. "Everything I do is to preserve what matters." Preservation, Hargreaves thought, often meant control. He left her standing alone, lamp flickering like a warning. In the guest wing, a door stood ajar. Thomas Hale knelt beside his travel trunk, papers scattered across the floor in frantic disorder. He startled when Hargreaves spoke. "Looking for something that might disappear?" the detective asked. Hale swallowed. "My notes. I thought they were gone." "They're on your desk," Hargreaves said calmly. Hale froze. Relief did not follow, fear did. "Did Belmont tell you what he found?" Hargreaves pressed. Hale shook his head too fast. "He didn't trust me." "But you feared someone else did," Hargreaves said. Hale's eyes darted toward the corridor. He lowered his voice. "Some truths don't belong to scholars. They belong to men who break things." Hargreaves let that sit. In the lower garden, moonlight revealed Lady Marian crossed near a stone bench. Fresh ashes lay at her feet. She stiffened when she heard him. "More letters?" he asked. "Old ghosts," she said quietly. "I'm done carrying them." Hargreaves nudged the ash pile with his boot. A fragment resisted the wind, the remains of a wax seal, recently broken. "You feared what Belmont knew," he said. She looked away. "He collected secrets like currency. He enjoyed the leverage. Fear, yes. Guilt, perhaps. Murder, unlikely. His final visit took him below the chapel. The crypt breathed cold air and incense. Abbot Lucas Rowan knelt before an effigy, candlelight trembling across carved stone faces. "You argued with Belmont," Hargreaves said softly. "Yes," Rowan admitted. "He accused this abbey of historic fraud, and modern echoes of it." Rowan hesitated. "He believed someone here continued that deception." Before Hargreaves could respond, a sound echoed above, quick footsteps retreating across stone. He moved fast, exited the crypt. reached the cloister just in time to see a figure vanish near the garden wall, Caleb Marsh. The groundskeeper did not run. He slipped away like someone who knew the timing, too precise, too calm. Hargreaves stopped beneath the arches, listening to the wind rake the stone. Motives were everywhere, but only one man moved through the abbey as if it belonged to him, and night had just confirmed it. Morning returned to St. Alderic Abbey without warmth. A thin gray light crept through the corridors, flattening shadows but failing to erase them. Detective Miles Hargreaves stood once more before the archive door, key heavy in his hand, thoughts already aligning into something sharper. He entered alone and closed the door. At first glance, nothing had changed. The shelves stood as before. The desk remained centered beneath the narrow window, yet the room carried a faint tension, like a breath held too long. Hargreaves went straight to Belmont's notes. In full daylight, the scholar's handwriting told a clearer story. Early pages were controlled, precise. Later ones trembled. The final sheets bordered on frantic. One document stood apart. Extract from missing folio, preliminary cipher. Below it, rushed lines described a systematic network of forged relics. Items aged artificially, sold as sacred artifacts, traced across private collections and discreet auctions. Belmont had underlined one sentence twice. Materials consistent with local origin. Pattern ongoing. Someone here wasn't honoring history. They were selling it. Hargreaves reopened the hidden compartment beneath the desk. The parchment fragment lay where he had left it, but something else rested behind it now. A broken wax seal. Fresh. He lifted it carefully. The symbol pressed into the wax was a stylized cross entwined with a letter mark. Not medieval, too clean, too deliberate. Belmont hadn't just been studying the past. He had caught the present in the act. A faint scrape sounded outside the door. Hargreaves turned sharply. Silence followed, but when he looked down, he saw it again. Chalky dust. New. A thin trail leading away from the archive. He followed it. The dust guided him back to the servants' passage. The narrow corridor smelled faintly of oil and cold earth. Someone had been through here again, recently, confidently. At the reinforced door, Hargreaves knelt. Fresh scarring marked the lock. Regular use. Someone without a key, but with time. This passage wasn't escape. It was access. He emerged into the eastern courtyard and found Caleb Marsh near the shed, tools laid out with unnatural order. "You returned this morning," Hargreaves said. Despite being dismissed, Marsh did not look surprised. "Forgot something." "You forget chisels," Hargreaves replied, "not habits." Marsh's jaw tightened. "Belmont confronted you," Hargreaves continued. "Not about theology, about materials, relics, stone fragments, objects that shouldn't exist." Marsh turned away. "You're guessing." "No," Hargreaves said quietly. "I'm following dust." The detective stepped back, letting the silence work. Marsh's hands trembled just enough. Belmont had traced the fraud to the abbey itself, to someone who understood stone, tools, hidden roots, someone who moved through the building without question. The archive, the passage, the forged history. Hargreaves walked back toward the cloister, certainty hardening behind his eyes. The locked room had been a performance. The missing page, a warning, and the stones had finally begun to speak. That evening, he would bring everyone together. The abbey was done hiding. By dusk, St. Alderic Abbey felt compressed, as if its vast stone halls had drawn inward, narrowing options and patience alike. Word had spread quietly. Not accusations, not yet, just tension. When Detective Miles Hargreaves requested everyone's presence in the chapter hall, no one refused. Candles lined the walls, their flames unsteady. Shadows clung to the arches overhead. Hargreaves stood at the center, hands folded behind his back, letting silence establish control. "Professor Edgar Belmont was killed because of what he discovered," he began. "Not because of who he offended, but because of what he was about to prove." Sister Elena Ward stiffened. Thomas Hale avoided every eye in the room. Lady Marian Cross sat rigid, composed only by habit. Abbot Lucas Rowan clasped his hands tightly, knuckles pale. "You all had reasons to resent the professor," Hargreaves continued. Ideological conflict, professional damage, personal history. But resentment is not method. He turned slightly, pacing. The archive was locked from the inside. No forced entry, no disorder. That was meant to end the discussion. A murmur rippled through the hall. But the lock was theater, Hargreaves said. The archive has a forgotten servant's passage, a concealed route allowing entry and exit without touching the door. Rowan's breath caught. Hale's head snapped up. That passage is unknown to most, Hargreaves added, but not to someone who maintains the Abbey's bones. His gaze settled deliberately on Caleb Marsh. Marsh stood near a column, arms folded, expression neutral, too neutral. The professor uncovered evidence of an ongoing relic forgery operation, Hargreaves said. Artifacts aged, altered, sold quietly. Materials sourced locally. Stone fragments, tool marks. Marsh's jaw tightened. Belmont recognized the pattern. He confronted the person responsible. That confrontation happened inside the archive. Lady Cross whispered something under her breath. Hale swallowed hard. You struck him with an object from the desk, Hargreaves said evenly. Killed him quickly. Then you staged the scene. You exited through the servant's passage, sealed the inner bolt, and let the mystery speak for itself. Silence thickened. Marsh exhaled slowly. You can't prove that. I can, Hargreaves replied. Your boots carried archive dust, fresh, repeated. The passage hinges were oiled recently. Your tools match the residue found on the forged relics recovered abroad. Rowan closed his eyes. You were dismissed because supplies vanished, Hargreaves continued. Not lost, sold. Marsh laughed once hollow. That scholar would have ruined everything. I found the old molds years ago. The monks before us started it. I just finished it. And murdered a man to protect it, Hargreaves said. Marsh's composure cracked. Not rage, resignation. He wasn't going to stop, Marsh muttered. So I did. Hargreaves signaled quietly. Two stewards stepped forward. Marsh did not resist as they took his arms. As he was led away, he glanced back once. This place still hides things, he said. You only scratched the surface. Hargreaves met his gaze. Secrets don't age well. The doors closed behind Marsh. The chapter hall exhaled. One part of the truth had surfaced. One remained. Because Belmont had removed a page for a reason, and Hargreaves still hadn't found it. Morning returned to St. Alderic Abbey quietly, as if the stone walls themselves were exhausted. The arrest had traveled through the cloister like a held breath finally released. Doors opened more freely. Footsteps no longer stopped when Detective Miles Hargreaves passed, yet the case was not finished. Hargreaves stood alone in the archive for the last time. The room looked smaller now, less ominous, deprived of its secret. Caleb Marsh had confessed to the murder, to striking Professor Edgar Belmont, when the scholar confronted him with proof of the forgery network. He had admitted using the servant's passage, staging the locked room, and selling altered relics through discreet collectors. It was a clean confession, almost too clean. Hargreaves did not trust clean endings. Belmont had removed a page from the codex deliberately, not in panic, not to destroy it, to preserve it. Hargreaves returned to the desk, to the hidden compartment, to the fragment Belmont had translated. He studied the notes again, slower this time, letting the rhythm of Belmont's thinking surface beneath the haste. One line stood apart. Names erased to protect the guilty, record hidden where light fails but prayer persists. Hargreaves looked up. Light fails, prayer persists, not the archive, the chapel. He moved through the corridors without urgency. The abbey no longer resisted him. In the chapel, thin sunlight filtered through stained glass, painting the stone floor in fractured color. Monks knelt in scattered silence. Hargreaves went past them, toward the side altar, old, unused, dedicated to a minor saint long forgotten. Beneath it he found what Belmont had meant, a loose stone. It lifted easily. Inside lay a narrow vellum page wrapped in linen. The missing folio. Belmont had hidden it where no one searching for profit would dare disturb beneath ritual. Hargreaves read quickly. The text was not symbolic. It was specific. Names, dates, roots. It detailed the original medieval forgery operation and, crucially, noted its eventual dismantling by abbots who feared damnation more than exposure. One margin note in Belmont's hand clarified everything. Modern forgeries mimic the old, but without ecclesiastical sanction. Acted alone. Marsh had acted alone. The abbey had inherited a crime but not continued it. Hargreave replaced the page carefully and resealed the stone. Belmont had died to stop a lie from spreading. The least Hargreave could do was let the truth stand intact. Later that day, he met Abbot Lucas Rowan in the study one final time. Hargreave explained what Belmont had hidden and why. Rowan listened without interruption. When it was done, he bowed his head. "We will confront our past honestly," the abbot said, "and we will make it clear that the crime ended with the man who committed it." Hargreave nodded. That was all justice could reasonably demand. As he left St. Alderic Abbey, the wind moved gently through the cloister gardens, stirring dead leaves from the stone paths. The place felt lighter, not innocent but honest. Another case closed, not by force, by patience. And yet, as Hargreave reached his car, he paused. Belmont had known he was in danger. He had chosen truth anyway. Some questions lingered about how many other places carried similar histories and how often the present borrowed its crimes from the past. If you stayed with this case to the end, drop a like and subscribe. The next truth is already waiting. And tell me, if you had found that page, would you have hidden it or exposed everything?